Okie dokie. And we are live.
Swag, swag, swag.
I actually have to post about it in my goddamn Discord now. Oh, I can't. Can you post it in Discord? You should have permission to post in We Are Live.
I do not have permission to post in We Are Live.
Oh, fuck. Can you put it in announcements or something? Or in News Center 7? Or just put it in Podcast Palace and tag podcast. Just put it in Podcast Population and tag podcast. Best part about YouTube is I can have captions. They're auto-generated, but I can have them on the stream.
Nice, 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 nice.
And not have to add an extension to do it.
I gotta get the link.
Okay. Hell yeah. Hell to the yeah. Did we ever look up if they allowed smoking on live?
From everything that I've seen, it should be fine.
Okay. Okay. All right. First one on YouTube, my dudes.
We've made it big.
We've made it to where we don't have to fucking edit anymore, and you just see the chat at the beginning. It's fine.
It's all good. It's all. Posted in my server.
Okay. How do I make it to where it purposefully stays on the channel? I can't remember. Stream settings.
Fronting.
Okay, no, it should stay on the channel. Cool.
Oh, them damn old Minecraft boys, and also another one.
Mood.
So now we've got 5 hermits in our brain. Yay!
It's so fun. Splitting is
That's so fun and quirky.
This disorder is so fun and quirky, you guys. It's not.
Woo! Oh, it's really not that.
It's literally that TikTok audio. It's like that TikTok audio. It's like, but it's not funny, is it? It's serious, or something like that.
Funny, but not funny. Haha. Funny. I'm suffering.
One came across our For You page that we saved.
Mm-hmm.
And they said specifically, use this for all of your trauma dumping. Funny, yes, but not funny, haha. Funny child abuse.
If that ain't a mood.
And I'm like, kind of I'm saving that audio for a rainy day.
Mommy's sitting here like, why does my face look so dark? You did turn on your fucking light, moron. There we go. Swag.
Mood. We should probably turn on our overhead light. What app am I going for? This one. Do I want it to be red? Do I want it to be red? Red. It's not showing up well because of the light outside, so white it is. We don't have we only have one ceiling titty in this apartment. The other ones are like square.
I'm supposed to have a ceiling titty.
Took it off, didn't you?
And I'm too short to put it back on.
Oh, mood. Just get your roommate to put it back on.
I either need to do that or just get my dad to do it if he's ever down.
That's fair.
Just be like, Papa, can you replace the ceiling titty?
I hate living on a main street because all I can hear are fucking cars all the time.
We just hear, mainly at night, people like to race around the neighborhood for some reason. Assholes in expensive cars.
I live at a really busy intersection and there's a train.
Oof.
So, like, and I went from living in the middle of nowhere to living here, so it's just like, this is kind of a culture shock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I'm not used to sounds. At least I don't have my neighbor that tried getting into my apartment and why I had to have a security camera and would go around talking under his breath and freak me out. It would just freak me out. Like, we talk under our breath to ourselves, we get it. But when other people do it, it freaks us the fuck out.
I feel that.
Just because of our anxiety. Alright. What time is it? 6:30. Let us start.
My turn, right?
Yes.
I know what I'm saying. Shut up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DIDIOTS podcast.
Woo.
Episode 22. Woo.
Trauma holders, because we're a role we haven't covered yet. So trauma holders can hold other roles besides just being a trauma holder, but in our system we categorize us separately.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if you guys get categorized them as like emotional protectors or what. Because they consider us emotional protectors for the most part. Some of us physical protectors. But, you know, we have one spicy trauma holder, a couple spicy trauma holders actually. And so, but they, for some reason, spicy trumps all categories in the faction thing we have going on right now.
It'd be like that.
Literally, we didn't call them roles in Simply Plural. We put factions.
We need to, at some point, kind of go through and figure out who's who and who does what, because
we went through our spreadsheet and went name by name. I mean, you can add it for field in Simply Plural, but but it's not like it's not like the most intuitive sorting system. If you could sort by like subcategory, that would be very nice. Simply Plural, I hope you're listening. If Simply Plural's devs were listening, I feel like we would be a much bigger podcast.
Right.
But, no, trauma holders are interesting because some of us are constantly reliving the trauma. Some of us just have effects from the trauma. It's different for every system, too, and it's different for every altar. So, for context for the stream, I am, like, we're having an election for a council because we're not functioning very well, and our current system hierarchy, which is basically just gatekeepers, isn't working. So we're trying to get representatives from every role, which is why we split us into the factions in Simply Plural, just so we can kind of do that. And I'm one of the nominees for trauma holder, because I'm one of the more ones that can. I'm not constantly reliving the trauma. I am more functional, but I still hold a lot of that trauma. Like some of the things, like I'm not allowed to drive. I'm one of the alters that's not allowed to drive. Things like that. And so it just depends on your system and your rules and different things like that.
Yeah, like we have kind of sort of, I'd say, different levels of trauma holder. Like I know that, like Ajax can technically be sort of sorted into trauma holder, but he's also a protector. And so he's the one that holds a lot of like the anger that we feel about the trauma that we've been through.
Some of our misguided protectors are trauma holders. But like some of us have no other function than a trauma holder.
Yeah, like one of see, I know she showed up pretty early into finding the system. One of the first few littles that we found was a trauma holder that held.
We have a lot of littles that are trauma holders.
Yeah, especially since once again, everybody, this is a disorder that forms
in
from
childhood.
Early childhood trauma. Woo! And like I can still remember one of the first times she came up to the front and she started having flashbacks and started like having a really bad panic attack. I don't want to get too into the situation because it just, delved into even more trauma happening to her, and that was fucked up because like that's one thing is like if you're around another system and like a trauma holder comes out and starts having a flashbacks and a panic attack, maybe don't tell them that they're just doing it for attention, because that's shitty and fucked up.
Right. Like that's that'll just make everything worse.
Right.
But it's like a lot of us trauma holders don't interact with social media, like just because of the hate that comes along with it. But like I was willing to come on the podcast just because it's something that needs to be talked about. And but it's like being a trauma holder is weird because you feel like you're constantly doing something wrong because of all of the trauma. Like all of us have this overwhelming sense of guilt all of the time. At least in our system, just because we experience so much like emotional abuse. And so like we constantly feel guilty. We constantly feel like less than and stuff like that. And it's not the system's fault. It's just because of what we went through and that we're trying to deal with it. Like there are some trauma holders that were persecutors. There's some trauma holders that were protectors. Like we have a reformed persecutor that, like a reformed, yeah, that's what I meant to say. That was correct. We have a reformed persecutor who's a protector now, and he's actually up for the protector position, and he's winning. Because everyone's like, his voice would be really valuable on the council because he's a reformed persecutor.
Yeah. And
he's like such a big trauma holder in our system. He holds a lot of the trauma from our like 16 to 18 years. And he's honestly one of the most influential people in our system because he's been here for so long, and two, he found himself pretty early. 3, he's a reformed persecutor, so he has a lot of stuff going for him. But it's super weird because like we're still, even when we heal from our trauma, we're still affected by it. Like even when we can think about it and not have a flashback about it, but like we can heal, but we can still be like really affected by it and have the complex issues that are related to it, because like complex PTSD is a thing, and that is very much what we have. And I mean, I feel like DID just comes with complex trauma anyway, like if like complex PTSD anyway, because you're in a weird dissociative state past CPTSD on the dissociative scale.
Yeah, because the dissociative scale basically goes like PTSD, CPTSD, I think BPD,
And then
And
OSDD.
then OSDD and DID.
And then DID, yeah.
Plus the other dissociative disorders sprinkled in, you know.
Right. And like it's absolutely wild because we just don't, I don't know, we don't get the same validation that other people get in the system. Like, yeah, the caretakers and stuff will come soothe us and whatever, but it's not like we don't interact with the system as much. We don't really have friends in the system. We're really isolated. And that's not the system's fault. It's because we just don't want to reach out and become friends with other people in the system because of our own issues. But it's like, I literally fronted for the first time while we were driving, and I'm one of the ones that's not allowed to drive, and so they immediately switched me out. And so that kind of sucked, but I understood why. And so it feels like I'm like, and a lot of times when a trauma holder is fronting, they don't want to acknowledge what's going on, so they try and push us out of the front. And so, again, it feels like we're kind of put to the side. But they're doing their job. They're trying to protect the system. I can't get mad at them for that. But the gatekeepers also need to realize that reliving trauma is a part of trauma, and we need to do it in order to get better.
It's like so much of being a system is having to balance, needing to, on one hand, you do need to experience your emotions and process what you go through and all that kind of stuff. But also what the system is sort of conditioned to do is to just push that all the way and hide so that you can get out of the situation that you're in.
Right.
And so when that's, how you've been handling it for so long, once you're finally out of that situation, it can still be really hard to finally let go and let those emotions be processed.
Right, absolutely. Like, I'm another trauma holder in the system, if I could talk. I don't know what's going on with my mouth.
It's like that.
But, and like, you can have introjects that are trauma holders, because I'm an introject. And it's because, like, I wasn't a trauma holder, and then I became a trauma holder because shit happened when I was fronting. And so I hold a lot of, like, that kind of stuff. But it's not like I was made to be a trauma holder. I was made to be an introject. I was made to be an introject of this person. I was made to be an emotional protector. And I ended up being a trauma holder, like, later on, because of everything that happened. Like, system roles are not rigid. They can change.
Yeah, and it's not like an alter only has one system role. Like, again, Ajax, he's a trauma holder. He's a protector. He's I know those are the main two. I feel like he has others. And like Vex, he's co-host, he's a gatekeeper, he's a protector.
Right.
We
have several gatekeepers that aren't just gatekeepers.
And then we've got the weird half gatekeepers who have weird gatekeeper abilities.
Yeah, for like no reason.
Use their powers for stupid shit, like staying in the front 24/7.
Right. But like, our gatekeepers are pretty overactive. They try and take away a lot of what we're going through because they think it's protecting us, when that is not the case. Because we were repressing a lot of stuff, and we had to, like, start acknowledging it. We've just felt like shit ever since, and the gatekeepers are like, I don't know what to do about this, and we're like, you can't do anything about it. We have to go through this. Like, you can't just keep trying to take the bad feelings away and try and keeping us distracted.
Like, if all you do is just bottle up the emotions, they're gonna come shooting back in your face eventually.
Yeah,
no matter what
it's gonna bite us in the ass. And that's just a simple fact.
We literally have a lake where we bottle up our emotions and throw them in there, and then occasionally they just shoot out and hit us in the face.
Mood. But, like, we've been trying to journal, we've been trying to do art, we've been trying to do stuff to manage the emotions, but trying to do it in a way that is beneficial and not just a distraction is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can absolutely distract ourselves. We know how to do that. We have fucking ADHD. We're distracted by everything. But when our brain is only wanting to focus on the bad shit, and there's just nothing we can do. Once it's like brought up to light that we're going through a lot of shit, our brain's gonna go, okay, yeah, you're going through a lot of shit. You're gonna fucking realize that now and stop fucking repressing it. But it's like the trauma holders have so much to play in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that they don't take us seriously, it's that they take us too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have a knee-jerk reaction every time, like, we come to the front. Like, right now they're not, because we're in a very structured environment. We're just talking about our issues, like, things like that. Stuff as a trauma holder, like, we know, like, what we can and can't get into, so it's fine. So they're not, like, freaking out right now, but most of the time when we front, they're freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the council is going to help that a lot. Because our voice is actually going to be heard.
Yeah.
Like, we just made notes for what it needs to be brought up by each person who, whether they make the council or not. It was just acknowledged by all of the nominees. And when they brought up topics for the first, like, thing that they need to talk about when people are elected. But it's super weird. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know if it's going to work. But we're trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, but being a trauma holder is so much more than just holding trauma. Because you can be reliving it constantly. Like one of our altars, you can have just random flashbacks that bring you to the front. You can have, like, all this shit. And we don't get fucking credit. A lot of people don't talk about the trauma holders.
And, like, sometimes I feel like a lot of the trauma holders in our system are also protectors, especially those of us like myself. I'm Nathan. I hold a lot of trauma in regards to arguments that we've gotten into.
Yeah. And
so our host does not get angry at people.
Right.
It's kind of one of those... It's just one of those things where it's
anger
like
triggers someone else
she's incapable of. Yeah.
Anger ends up triggering someone else out.
And it fell on me to have to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, because I was the one that, like, was really affected by our boundaries being repeatedly broken.
Right. Like, I used to be a persecutor because of all of my trauma, but I'm the reformed persecutor they're talking about. My name is Carson. But I still hold all of that trauma. I've healed from it, and I've acknowledged it, and I've done what I've had to do to try and get over it. But it's completely different than trying to get over trauma as a singlet too, because, like, you have the flashbacks, you have the nightmares, you have all of this shit, and sometimes you can't control the switches, and people just get... I get angry, I front, and it's not, like, the healthiest thing. DID is not supposed to be a healthy coping mechanism.
Right.
It never was supposed to be. Because DID is a disorder for a reason.
Right. DID comes about from a brain being put under...
Way too much stress.
Young child's brain being put under so much stress they cannot handle it.
Yep. And it's just like Like, I've done shitty things because I was like because of my trauma and because of me being a persecutor. I've done shitty things. I've done shitty things to our system. I've done shitty things to other people. I've screamed at people. I've like threatened people. It's not a good, and like I've realized that in myself, and I realized that wasn't healthy, and I've changed, but like I still get angry.
Yeah.
But it's easier for me to manage the anger in a productive way than to take it out on people. But we still have people who like actively take out the anger on other people and things like that. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of our misguided protectors do that. They take out their anger on other people, and that's part of why they're misguided, is because it's just like a whole like thing for them to get over their trauma. But and then we just have some misguided protectors who are chaotic. Remus. No, I'm not saying that on the podcast, Remus.
The feel when I know exactly what he's trying to get you to say.
He wants me to say the hashtag. And I'm like, no. Please no. But it's... I don't know. It's super weird. Mm-hmm. Like, just being a person that holds trauma, because it's super dysfunctional sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be scary, especially when you go through flashbacks.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, but just like every part of the system is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So we're necessary too. And that can be scary for us to be out sometimes. It's also important.
Right. Like, I'm one of the ones who is usually reliving the trauma. Mm-hmm. But because we're in this setting, for some reason, it's just, like, calmer, and I can just talk. But, like, it's like, I'm one of the ones who's, like, constantly reliving what I went through. And mm-hmm. It sucks, because people don't know how to, like, respond to it. Mm-hmm. Especially within the system. But, like, out of the system, too, people don't know how to respond to it. That's just a whole thing in and of itself. But, like, panic attacks are, like, a normal occurrence in our system. Like, it's just because of what we went through. Mm-hmm. And it's not a bad thing to have trauma holders. It's not a bad thing to have trauma. It's not your fault. Mm-hmm. And if you have this disorder, you have trauma. I'm just stating that again. Mm-hmm. But it's just wild, because trauma is so inherent to this disorder. I don't know why I'm getting on this topic, but it's fine. But trauma is just so inherent to this disorder that I just don't know how people are like, there's no trauma involved. I'm just like, there's trauma involved.
Like trauma is what,
stops the fusion from happening. It stops the fusion of the ego states from happening, and they develop into their own separate people with separate memories, separate emotions, separate morals, separate everything. Except for a separate fucking body.
I think part of it is that some people are just, they think that, going through something traumatic means they're inherently broken in something. And that's not true.
Right. Just because you're broken, just because you think you're broken doesn't mean you're not worthy of being fixed either. Mm-hmm. That was our thing, is like, we took broken as a term of endearment. And we were like, we can fix what's going on. And that's why we're trying to elect the council and everything like that, is we're trying to take a hold of our situation and do what we can do to make it manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not fun having DID or OSDD. But, like,
it's really not.
For us with the amnesia involved, it really fucking sucks because we just can't remember anything. Like, I don't remember what Arlie and Sam talked about on the podcast, and I'm talking on the podcast. Just because I'm not them, I don't know what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I could have repeated the same point they did 5 times.
I think you've been mainly stating new ideas. You haven't really been repeating yourself.
That's good. That's good, at least. Oh, and Carson was in the front. I completely forgot Carson came to the front at all. That's just the thing with amnesia, is just you just forget everything, you know?
Mm.
And it sucks. Especially as trauma holders, because we can only experience what we experience, and so we have to forcibly make happy memories for ourselves.
Mm.
So we can have something good to look back on that isn't the shitty trauma.
Mm. And speaking from experience, it can definitely be kind of hard to try and be in the front and make good experiences for yourself.
Right. Like, I'm a trauma holder, but I'm not, like, just a trauma holder. But because of the nature of my trauma, that influenced my role.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I do things to, like, bring up our confidence and stuff like that, just to try and, you know, take back what was taken from us, in a way. Like, I'm taking back my power by doing these things. And that's what a lot of the trauma holders are, like, trying to do, is, like, trying to take back their power.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that comes with being a trauma holder is often trauma holders can be more easily re-traumatized.
Oh, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. I mean, because, like, and people try and bring up the fact that, like, if an alter doesn't know their trauma or whatever, then it's a whole thing. But I'm like, this disorder is made to hide trauma from you. There are going to be alters without, like, definitive trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's being hidden from them. Of course, it's going to... Of course it's going to do that, but you also may not realize something you went through was traumatic. Something we went through in our childhood that we didn't realize was fucked up until our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we went through something at 15 and we didn't realize until therapy at, like, 20, 21. We were like, oh, that was fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist was like, yeah, it was. And I'm just like, well, thank you for the validation.
And, like, for us, because in our system we don't really have the same kind of amnesia barriers. We mainly just have emotional amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big traumas that I hold is something that we've always known happened to us.
Right.
It's always been an experience that we knew happened to us.
But you just didn't realize it was traumatic until later?
Mm-hmm. We just didn't think about it.
Right.
It's like, oh, it can't affect us if we just don't think about it. But then every time we remembered it happened, we'd spiral.
We've had that happen.
And that's the way to...
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
Said that's not a healthy way to process your trauma, is to bottle it up and then spiral when it comes back out.
Right. And that's why the idea of endogenic systems is inherently anti-recovery, because they're like, oh, you don't have trauma. But finding the trauma and dealing with it is how you heal from DID. There's no cure, but you can live a manageable life. I'm sorry I keep bringing up endogenic systems, but it's just a point that needs to be made.
We're talking about trauma holders. It's necessary to really reiterate to people that this is a disorder that is caused by trauma.
Right.
And that can be scary to admit that you've been through something traumatic.
And you don't have to look for it until you're ready, but admitting something happened is the first step. Bringo blah. Like, I'm not a trauma holder, but I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. But, like, our trauma holders, like, don't realize how much we actually do value them, because we know they're essential. Like, we know we don't act like it. And, like, our littles feel like that, too, is like, because we feel guilty when we're little. And we've, like, discussed that with our therapist. We don't necessarily know why. But it's, like, a whole... Like, even littles are trying to reclaim their power. They're trying to reclaim their childhood. And, like, having a little trauma holder is even more like difficult to deal with, because they have the capacity to think like a child, and so they're going to blame it on themselves. They're going to have that, like, egocentric view of the world, because internally they're children. And so you have to, like, reiterate to them that it wasn't their fault and that they did nothing wrong and things like that. And you have to reiterate that to every trauma holder, but it's, like, especially with the littles. We have several littles who are trauma holders. And one of them has pretty much, like, gotten over it. I don't want to say got over it, but you know what I mean. One has pretty much, like, healed a lot of his trauma. And so he's, like, trying to take back his childhood. He's trying to be a kid. He's trying to just be a little so we can de-stress. And that's why we consider him an emotional protector. Like, some of the littles have roles, some of the littles don't. But he's one that we consider an emotional protector. But until he's not a little, he's in the little category, so... He's actually the one winning. He's actually the one winning the vote by a landslide right now.
It's like, yes, pick the responsible little for the job.
He's also the second alter we found, because the first one would be our host, Carter. So he was literally, like, the first alter aside from Carter that we found, and so he's been in the system longer than most of us, and so he just knows what's going on, and so he's just, like, winning that vote by a landslide. And we're like, good. We're like, good, I knew that was going to happen. There have been a couple votes against him, but it's not, like, anything near what some of the votes are, like a 50-50 split. It's kind of ridiculous. But I think, like... Excuse me. But, like, trauma holders are completely valid. They're necessary to a system's functioning. Every alter is necessary to a system's functioning. But trauma holders make it to where, like, we don't have to deal with the trauma all the time. And it's relieving for the rest of the system for them to be here. And I'm kind of wording this wrong, but it's fine. My point is getting across. I'm not the best alter with my words, but they're necessary. They do a lot more than they give themselves credit for. Yeah, but it's being a trauma holder isn't, sunshine and rainbows. Why can't I talk today? None of us can talk today, apparently. But it's not sunshine and rainbows, obviously. It's thunderstorms but,
Well, the thing about thunderstorms is that
rainbows come after.
And even during the thunderstorms, it's important to, cuddle up and make a blanket for it. and even as trauma holders, I think it's really important that we take the time to be able to, again, make good and happy memories for ourselves too.
Right. It's even more
part of how you heal from it.
It's even more complicated being a host who's a trauma holder, because you have a bunch of good memories you can look back on, but that trauma is still just looming and doing everything that it can. Because I'm not the original host. I was made to relieve Kaya after a year, who was made to relieve Riley when she went dormant. And so I hold a lot of our trauma, but I'm aware of a lot of it because I went through it, but then I split alters. And it was like a whole, it's like a whole thing. Because subsystems exist. It's so fun.
There's a topic for another day.
That's a topic for a whole other day. But being a host trauma holder is wild. Because
it's very difficult.
It's very difficult. Because I am anxious all the time. And I don't remember my dreams, probably for the best, though.
I feel that. Yeah, I mean, God, there's too many people in the front right now.
I felt that.
I hold a lot of the trauma, especially regarding some recent stuff that we went through.
Right.
And, I tried to just repress it, and then I split 2 alters.
That happened to us, except it was a bit more than 2. And
I mean, possibly more of the recent people that we've had showing up or as a result from that, but I can very much tell that these 2 in specific are
from this, yeah,
a direct result of me trying to repress and not deal with my emotions regarding the trauma that I went through.
Yeah, that happened to us, because basically, something happened to stop our, grieving process, and we just haven't been able to acknowledge it at all. And trying to start to acknowledge that is a fucking trip. And that's why nothing has gotten done around our apartment, is because we're dealing with our mental health. And school starts sometimes. August 22nd. It's fine. Everything's fine.
It's all good.
Everything is deja vu. But repressing your issues can cause more problems in systems, because it can cause splits. It can cause trauma holders to be stuck in the front. It can cause a bunch of other shit. So don't repress your issues if you can help it. Because we couldn't help it.
Can also cause things like having a persecutor front stuck for the last 2 months, who every time you acknowledge your presence, she tells you to off yourself.
Yep, that's fair. That's completely fair. I have a couple persecutors that are doing that. But it's it's just wild. And I can't even Just because we're talking about it, my brain is just like, hey, you're going to go into a negative place. I'm like, stop that.
It's like, stop that.
They're like, hey, all the trauma holders are in the front. It's time. I'm like, no, it's not.
It's like, this is not what we agreed to.
This is not what we agreed to, brain. Come here, Moo. Special guest, my cat, if he comes up here. Come here. Come here, dude. Come on.
Come on, kitty. I don't know where my cats are. They're somewhere. Oh, can I go over?
Come on. Okay, he's not coming up here. It's fine. Whatever. But, like, trauma holders are, like, they're so necessary because, like, I mean, in the case of me, it doesn't really stop the whole system from feeling it, but everyone else, it is. Because everyone likes to feel my emotions. Because I'm the host.
I feel that.
So they have very much emotional bleed over with me. And that's why we've been feeling shitty for a week. But it's like... Again, trauma is so necessary for these disorders. Like, you can't just will yourself to be a system. You can't just say, I'm a system and I'm a system. You gotta, like, do more than that, you know? Like, you gotta research this disorder. You gotta know that it's traumagenic. You gotta know all this stuff about this disorder. And then you can be diagnosed with the disorder. Like, a lot of people who are diagnosed with the disorder don't do the proper research either. And that's, like, a whole topic for a whole other day, but... Because some people who have DID are like, well, that's not how I experienced DID, so you're wrong. And I'm just like, okay, well, then do your fucking research. Because it's possible. Because they're like, you can't have so many alters. Yes, I can. Special guest, my cat. No, don't get on the desk. Don't get on the desk, sir.
Something that, like, I really struggled with when I was finding the system was...
Get off the desk.
That, you know, I was absolutely terrified and petrified that I was somehow faking it because, there's no way that what I went through was traumatic enough.
Right, and that's part of what I went through too. Was I was like, it's not traumatic enough, and then dude, go if you're gonna go. But because I was like, it wasn't traumatic enough, and then I started remembering everything that actually happened, and I was like, oh, okay, it was enough. But there's no enough because I know people who have more trauma than me that don't have DID. It's just your capacity to dissociate, whether you did, whether you didn't, stuff like that. Okay, I need you to go.
And the thing about trauma is that trauma is subjective. Two people can go through the exact same experience, and one person can come out heavily traumatized, and the other person can come out totally fine.
Yeah, we've seen that happen.
And, like, especially when it comes to trauma that happens to a young child.
You have to think about it from a young child.
Trauma is trauma.
Yeah. You have to think about it from a young child's point of view because literally it's been proven that, like, a kid's brain can't tell the difference between neglect and sexual assault. It just knows that its needs aren't being met and that something bad is happening and things like that. It's been proven that your kid's brain just can't tell the difference between, like, these big things. And so they're all equivalent in its brain.
Like, we're still very much in the process of trying to figure out what our early childhood trauma was. Because the main trauma that we remember happened when we were, like, 10 to 18.
Right.
And that was a lot of neglect.
We remember a lot of our 10 to 18 trauma, but we don't remember a lot of our 10 and before trauma. We have context around it because there was, like, a court case and we moved and all this other stuff, so we have context around it, but we don't have the actual trauma.
And, like, I remember, like, someone someone I'm not going to say her name, was saying earlier that there was, one big event that we remember.
Right.
But, like, a lot of our early childhood memories are not there.
Same. Absolutely same. Any closing thoughts on trauma holders?
These are a very important and necessary part of being a system, and they deserve love and care, just like every other alter in the system.
Yep, absolutely. They may take a little bit more empathy than others, but you gotta meet them with empathy.
Like,
some may be resistant to it.
Constantly reliving trauma.
Some may be resistant to it because of their trauma, but it's completely different than what you're going through. It's still what you went through as a unit, but it's completely different than what you know and what you are going through and how you process things. Because that trauma holder is not going to process them the same way. But they're completely valid. They're completely necessary for systems to function. Everything like that. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for meeting some of our trauma holders. Thank you for being y'all and watching us and doing what we and helping us do what we do. So thank you guys so much. Have a great night, and we will see you